Go.
Hello and welcome to Writer Mother Monster. I'm your host Laura Ehrlich, and tonight's guest is Yexandra Diaz. Before I introduce Yexandra, I'll tell you a little bit about Writer Mother Monster. Our conversations are streamed live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and then released as an audio podcast on all major platforms. As always, please chat with us during the interview, and we will weave your comments into our conversation. And a special thanks to our sponsors and patrons listed on the Writer Mother Monster website. Your support helps make this show possible. If you enjoy the episode, please consider becoming a patron or patroness to help keep the podcast going. You can look for details at writermothermonster.com. Now I'm excited to introduce Yex. Yexandra Yex Diaz is a multi-disciplinary artist whose oeuvre is her sobering expression of what it is to exist in a world of resistance, resilience, and revolution during a new era of Renaissance rooted in healing. Chicago-born and New Haven raised, the polarizing reality of oppression juxtaposed alongside privilege inspires Yex, an oral narrator, to employ the art of spoken word as a vehicle for messages that raise awareness around social and environmental injustices. Yex's style uplifts afro-indigenous culture while evoking radical spiritualism to rewrite the dangerous single narratives that plague stigmatized peoples. She lives in New Haven, Connecticut, where she has 4 kids ranging from 7 to 16, and she describes writer motherhood in 3 words as fulfilling, healing, ingenious. Now join me in welcoming Yex Diaz. Hello.
Hello, Laura. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I am wonderful. Happy to be here.
Thank you. We're happy to have you. And we have a lot to talk about tonight, but let's start with those 3 words you used to describe writer motherhood, and they were fulfilling, healing, and ingenious. Tell us about those words.
Absolutely. So, I became a mother at a very young age, at the age of 16. I'm at a point in my life currently where my daughter is exactly half my age, right? I'm 32, she's 16 herself. She's at the age where I was literally, right, moving into motherhood. And these 16 years have been the most fulfilling journey, and the motherhood is the most fulfilling role that I've ever played in my entire life. And I would say that it lends itself to both the challenge and the joy that it is being a mother, right? Because I don't want to like shroud that in toxic positivity by making it seem like it's all great, right? It is challenging, it is exhausting, but when you can overcome and triumph in those areas, it becomes extremely fulfilling and rewarding. So that's why I chose that word first. Actually, the piece that I intend to share comes from this space of having a conversation with another mother about how fulfilling motherhood is to me. And healing, because I think that motherhood is an interesting nuance that is juxtaposed between remembering what it was like to be a child, right? And maybe it's for any parent, but for me, I'm a mother, and trying to be a better parent, right? Not trying to repeat unhealthy cycles, trying to cherry pick the wonderful characteristics that my mom had, and also trying to heal from the spaces that I know she couldn't afford to heal from and be able to endow us with, and then I can do this for my children. So it is a healing experience for my inner child. And it is, again, rewarding to be able to see me give things to my kids that I wasn't afforded. And the final word was ingenious, right? And we think about like writer mother and this ingenious nature that mothers have, and being able to problem solve and just figure it out and roll with the punches and be able to make something out of absolutely nothing. Like alchemist at a foundational and the highest level, literally and figuratively. So that's what really drove me to choose those words to represent like my experience with motherhood.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and we'll dive into all of those issues in a few minutes. But
Yeah,
first, let's hear a little bit of your work, Yex. And this is a piece for context to our listeners that I heard you perform at an event a little while ago, and it literally brought the room to tears. We were all men, women, everyone, but it particularly struck me as a writer mother for reasons that I'm sure will become clear pretty soon to listeners. But it is incredibly powerful. So thank you for sharing this piece with us right off the bat, and then we'll hear more of your work again as the hour progresses. But why don't you take it away, Yex? Floor is yours.
absolutely. And I'm hoping that I'm remembering which one I did first correctly.
Okay.
But I am going to do the one that I am compelled to share, that I did that night. And just for a little preface, I wrote this piece during conversation with two other mothers who were expressing the challenges around motherhood. And I'm having a conversation with my sister-in-law, and I'm saying with a lot of glee, right, that being a mother is the most fulfilling thing that I've ever done in my life. And um in my naivete, I felt like other parents had to feel that way, or else why would they become parents? And she was like, I am not fulfilled by motherhood. And I was like, what? Well, what are you fulfilled by? And she couldn't answer, but she promised to get back to me when she thought of what it was that fulfills her, but she just knew it was not motherhood. And maybe about 2 weeks later, I'm having a conversation with a different girlfriend, and she is sharing a difficult experience she had maybe a decade before, right? She went through the experience of having a stillbirth. And I've known this woman for close to a decade, and I never knew this. I never knew this level of trauma that she had endured. So it was shocking. And while I'm on the phone with her, she gets a call from her doctor on the other line. And at the very same time, my sister in law is texting me that she realized what fulfills her. And she said it is when she has the ability to see the godliness in others, especially when she cannot see it in herself. So I was like, wow, this is very profound. And um, my girlfriend gets back on the line. She takes me off of hold, and she's just devastated. Her cancer has returned, and she's expressing her, she's venting at the moment, and she's saying, I'm steadfast, I'm pious, I am a God fearing woman. And as much as I have faith, I feel like I keep being tested. And no matter how much I endure, it's relentless, it's unforgiving. And how could I continue to maintain my faith if, I have to continuously endure trial? So when I got off the phone, this is kind of what just flowed out of me. I don't believe in a God. However, I am not godless. I mean, if everything happens for a reason, how can I entertain the thought that God exists? In a traditional sense, like a past, stiff, rigid tense, synchronicity be the mistress. The more I explore, it begins to sound like he dropped his S, dropped his dress in suit per recognition. Ambiguous neuter noun definition, he is a derivative of she. This narrative is transitive. Look at how he booked. Marks it in the name of machismo. The more that we grow, he begins to devolve. Demise is the desire that revolves. Acidic teardrops violently dissolve non-soluble solutions. It is she who combats his pollution, seeking retribution for his mess. After abandoning his vastness, son, you too rotate on axis, and as is, your revolution is convoluted. You assume my lunar luminescence solely ad-libs your song of night. Who exactly it is do you think that nurtures your plight? I don't believe in a God. However, I am not godless. I mean, if everything happens for a reason, how can I entertain the thought that God exists? And if he does exist, he's a deadbeat, a mirage like the haze of a dead heat, raising vengeful hands and resentful children. Zealots with daddy issues seeking validation, jealous siblings vying, singing inundated praises, sporadic miracles, prayers answered on occasion, the shameless strut of the midnight marauder, perpetrating to perpetuate nuts, impregnating the dead hour. Neurotic, narcissistic, psychotic, and vindictive, who is more restricted than Mother Nature with the world at her bosom? Suckling her to sate our strife, depleting her resourceful life. She renews herself, recycled, coming full circle akin to mother with child, cunning like a woman scorned, tongue sharp, heart vow, mighty like the sword, hum lullaby volatile. She is ripe, raw, real. And the mercy of her sustenance may be a fate far worse than death, for the substance we ingest is derived of her distress. Her distrust, scarred and marred, disfigured, stretch marked, stretched thin like banshee howling, whipped by her winds, blown out waistline, equating her birth canal to a black hole in deep space, fracturing time, her titties hang, with the wretched stench of still birthrights and aborted namesakes. Despite so, her bounce back game is crazy. She grants respite long before the bitterness of spite seeps down her throat, settling in her belly, gestating. The aftertaste reeks, threatening to choke, so she spits, regurgitating, a reverberation to rebirth a nation. The sound of her exhale is a sigh of relief. Damned, our inhale is a sign of reprieve. She is exhausted with our prolonged state of infancy. We still crawl, though she has taught us to walk. She is tired of carrying us. Bent hip, tilted spine, walk limp, talk slick, yet she exercises a patience divine, the mother of all mothers, the martyr of all matriarchs. This maternal deity's matrix plays tricks on the origins of infinity, concentrated dark matter moving swifter than the speed of light. She stays fly, the source of all life. I don't believe in a God, however, I am not godless. I mean, if everything happens for a reason, how can I entertain the thought that God exists? For come the morning when we wake, parched lips sip from the cup of water taint, eyes prostrate, hands elevate to skies we paint, poisoning her offspring and grow the forest rank. You can hear the disappointed cry of a mother faint between the thunderous booms and striking features of lightning, her contractual quakes, shifting faulty plates, hemorrhaging casualties when the surface of her abdomen is cracked open. The aftermath is frightening. The only thing immaculate about your conception is I dropped my ex. Child, why would you deny? I dropped my eggs to ease my loneliness. Bent like a rib, I did not come from your side. Do not attempt to straighten me. For if I break like waters, I'll send you back from whence you came. Implantation, incepting your reality. The sole creator of souls, the vessel to the physical realm. My womb is Eden. On earth, hell, no escaping. Your labored return, unfavored reincarnation. Knowledge fed, eternal lactation. Lessons relearned until maturation. The blessing earned, nirvana. I go by many monikers, but you can call me mama. I don't believe in a God, however, I am not godless. I am God. They tried to condense me to goddess. Paradoxical, naivete is bliss. Align your paradigm. I pre-exist.
I just feel like we needed a moment of silence after that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was absolutely incredible. And that was exactly the one I was thinking of that brought everyone to tears. And I was off screen, like wiping my eyes. So thank you. And the context for it as well is even more, makes it even more powerful if that were possible. So thank you so
I
much.
appreciate that. I truly do. I think that we have long seen this unbalanced nature, right? Living in a patriarchal society, despite how much women carry on their backs, and this lack of recognition and acknowledgement. And I wanted to, without being blasphemous, because I have my own relationship with my faith, to give that ode to women and the nature of us in being creators, right? Whether we're creating children or content.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, and I love that creating children or content, and that's exactly what we're talking about here, writer, mother, and there's the monstrousness side too of breaking down those established patriarchal constructs. And so let's talk a little bit because I think it's possible that you are among the few folks that we've had on the show who use their craft for activism as well,
Mm,
activism and advocacy. So let's talk about that a little bit, and we'll
yes.
go back to motherhood. But tell me what drives you. What drives your work?
So I think this is beautiful, right? This is like very full circle, full circle. It's like a microcosm of motherhood because my mother was a giver. She was a pillar in our community. Again, I'm from New Haven. I'm Chicago born, but raised in New Haven. So New Haven is home. And my mother was a pillar in the New Haven community. And I watched her give selflessly and voraciously, without much inhibition. There was no apprehension or no hesitation about the way that she gave and the degree in which she gave. And it was very inspiring. And I just happened to be my mother 2.0. So, it was very frustrating trying to figure out how to give. Very often we think that we need power, influence, money, resources, and I didn't realize that the gift that I had to give was the most free and readily available, which was my voice. And unfortunately, the father of my daughter died in 2012 when she was 6 years old and when I was 22 years old.
Oh,
And I just felt like that wasn't supposed to be his story. He was a athlete, a high performing athlete. And in the Junior Olympics, he had like UConn scouting him his freshman year of high school. He was really that good. And he died unfortunately due to gun violence. And I was trying to figure out how can I be the change that I want to see without being cliche, right? Be an agent of change in my own community to support my community in healing. And that kind of began my journey. So I ended up participating in an AmeriCorps service program called Public Allies, which is focused on community leadership development. So they try to identify individuals in the community to serve the community. I simultaneously, due to the stories that these sisters were sharing with me, decided to become a doula at the same time. So I was taking the doula training and just doing a lot of community advocacy and organizing in general. So I don't think I know the program was extremely beneficial to me because it allowed me to catalyze, maximize my potential, my strengths, my skills to the degree that I can actually be the agent that I seek to be in the community, right? So again, I give back in all of these different capacities. I am a birth and a death doula. Um, Aside from the poetry, I am an independent facilitator that focuses on social justice issues. And then I'm a program manager now for the same AmeriCorps program that I was once a member of. I ended up becoming a staff member for. So yeah.
wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and there's so much I want to ask you. Where to start? Um, okay, so let's start with the birth and death doula work, which is I can only imagine how challenging that might be and rewarding and beautiful at the same time. So you are with people as they bring life into the world and as they leave the world. Can you talk a little bit about those two sides of life and what you've seen and experienced and how it informs your work?
Absolutely. So I'd like to say like the spectrum is more like a coin, right? Because they seem like they're so far on either end, but they're so closely related in nature. And again, I had a lot of women sharing their traumatizing birth stories and sharing it in a way where it was just like, we have this bootstrap mentality that tells us, like, oh, just get over things. And they're just glossing over this stuff like, no, this is serious stuff. I don't think people take into account how extreme it is to carry a child and what the potential risks are, And it's like it's not enough to be affected by something. What are we going to do about it? How do we contribute to making the change? I have a friend who said there's so many empaths and so little empathy, right? So to me, the way that you get from empathy to, I mean, from being an empath to empathy in action is by doing something, is by mobilizing, you know? So that started off my doula training. And it was very specific, especially to the Black and Brown community, because Black women experience, birth violence, birthing violence, fatalities in birth, and maternal morbidity is 3 times higher for Black women nationally. So it was like, okay, how do we really support this? And I think the way that we support this, especially, and I know as a mother, right, this is no shade to the contributions male practitioners make, healthy male practitioners make. But we know when we have a field that is saturated by individuals who do not themselves go through the experience and know what it is like to be able to serve us properly. Who better to serve a woman than a woman, you know? So equally, my mother passed away, and I was getting these compliments, oddly enough, from individuals about how I was handling her death. And even from the funeral director and the owner of the funeral home was saying, you should get into this business. So I was like, okay, I'm not really into like, being in the funeral home and the morgue. How can I fit in here? And I learned about what a death doula is, right? So it was just very timely to be able to lend myself and my ability, which again comes from my mom, who it wasn't taboo to speak about death in our family in the house, especially at a young age. We were actually very prepared for my mother's transition. We've had these conversations that were normalized in our family, and it's a very big part of American culture to not discuss these things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when I say death doula, sometimes people think about what does that look like, because a birth doula cares for a mother during pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum period. As a death doula, I am there not just to support someone in end of life care or in bereaving, but in estate planning.
Mm.
Because many people do not plan for their estate because they're so afraid to have the conversation about dying, And I think the best way to prepare for it is to talk about it.
Yeah.
How else are we going to be able to know what someone's wishes are? you know where someone's deed is, or what is left, where's the will. And a lot of people don't know if there was insurance or not, and how to really handle the entire process. So that's basically my journey into like becoming a doula on both sides of those spectrums.
Oh, yeah. And it's such necessary work. And to go back to the motherhood side a little bit, and birth and um, mortality, and the need for support for women, specifically, as you said, from the Black and Brown communities who are um, are in need of that extra support. So can you talk a little bit, and I know we've talked about this on the show before, but you have such a unique perspective as a doula. Um, can you give us a little bit of context and reasons for why um, birth is that much more risky for the Black and Brown communities? Why is it in healthcare that this community is so underserved?
Yeah. So it's very unfortunate to say that as we advance as a society, that I think that we are going in a good direction, right? And trying to grow in a space of inclusion and dismantling oppressive systems. But the reality is that we're not fully there yet, right? And the reality is not aligned with the desire. So there's a lot of work that still has to be done for so many oppressed communities. And again, Black and brown mothers. And it's not just us, because a lot of mothers die at the hands of practitioners during childbirth, the postpartum period, for not necessarily being heard. And I think what that again boils down to is these systems that have been put in place, that I don't think we see as overtly intentionally seeking to oppress certain groups of individuals, but do and have for a very long time. So, there are hard realities, or hard discussion topics, rather, like the fact that Black women were experimented on in the namesake of gynecology, without anesthesia, because it was thought that Black women didn't feel pain. And people don't realize how that is still prevalent, how that still shows up, because it's such a deep seated conditioning, to the degree that there was a poll of medical professionals who admitted that they don't take the claim seriously. Then we have societal stigmas that come into play, right? Again, this is not just for Black and brown women, but often when women will complain during childbirth, they'll be dismissed because they might be stereotyped as being someone who's just looking for pain medication, or something or another, just complaining for no good reason. And before you know it, something that was preventable, that required early intervention, has spiraled out of control. And now we have a mother, who has passed away, right? Who is not able to be there for her child, who is leaving behind a community of individuals to, like, heal in this regard. So it's just, it boils down to a long-standing history of racism, essentially, that creates this dynamic. And I think that it is important for us to, be accountable and to support each other, and to do the work. I think, it's easy to complain, but what is really going to make the change? We need more women who desire to not see other women go through the same type of violent experiences as they have gone through, moving into the field, becoming midwives, becoming gynecologists, becoming OBs, becoming doulas, whatever type of support professionals that they can become, so that they can prevent things like that from happening. If a mother knows what it's like internally, she's able to identify it easily for another mother. She's able to say, actually, I don't think she's exaggerating, right? She might have preeclampsia, you know?
Yeah,
Eclampsia can become fatal extremely fast.
absolutely. Did you have an advocate for you when you were pregnant, and how were your four births? And yeah.
So I didn't have an advocate, and I was actually, I would say, my own advocate. But I didn't really know what that looked like as a teenager. Again, I had my children at a very young age, and I had an old school mom who told me to behave myself, to make sure I don't cuss, and make sure I'm modest while I'm giving birth.
Oh God, how
Yeah.
modest you. I feel like it's like the least modest thing I can possibly imagine, right?
So I was so young, I didn't even know that I was experiencing violence,
Mm.
until I had my fourth child, and I was an adult. I was 25, I was married, and I wasn't in Connecticut. I had actually relocated to Virginia. So my first three children are born in Yale, which is a wonderful children's hospital, a great hospital for individuals who suffer with cancer, and it is a great teaching hospital. But sometimes people create this monolith out of Yale, and they think that you're going to get grade A service, but they forget, because it is a teaching hospital, you have individuals who are learning and practicing on you versus veterans who have very skilled hands. So I left Yale with really bad. So I have four cesareans, and I left Yale with just terrible, a bad wound. Like, the healing process was fine. I didn't get any infections or anything like that. But the scar was so big, the scarring was terrible. And the pain that came from the scarring was horrible. And I just thought, this is my life, this is my existence. And a lot of moms think that. right? There's like the phantom numbness and tingling and the pain. Sometimes you sneeze and it feels like your scar is going to rip open. And I had my baby, my last child in Chesapeake, and I had a wonderful, skilled, surgeon. She was amazing. I had a gentle cesarean, which is right. Like people don't realize that you can write a birth plan for a C-section too, and you can dictate what kind of atmosphere you want and certain things, dynamics that you desire, like a delayed clamping of the cord, like I want smooth sounds, like I want chest to chest before you do his APGAR, all of these different things, right? And I will never forget when my surgeon cut me, she said, "Oh my God, you have so much scar tissue." She asked me, "Do you mind if I remove it?" It's like, of course, get to it. And my scar is now invisible and it doesn't hurt. And I healed so quickly. I mean, like I was ready to go day 2. And C-sections, usually you're in the hospital between 3 and 5 days. And it was the moment that I was like, oh, wow, I thought I was receiving quality care until I got actual quality care. So that's my story. And I'm fortunate that it wasn't more severe than that, right? Considering the nature of like 4 cesareans back to back. I was so young, I did not realize what kind of threat I was posing to my own self. Um, and I have sisters who will share like extreme stories about like, oh, my baby almost took me out when I gave birth. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, they developed like um heart, issues, or, again, the preeclampsia came afterwards, hypertension, diabetes, things that they never had before have developed throughout their pregnancy or postpartum period. Um, so again, even though it's violent, right? I'm fortunate that, I was receiving good care my last pregnancy and I was able to see that contrast and heal, right? I think
Yeah,
every mother deserves to know that you don't necessarily, and I mean, it's probably not a narrative or a reality for everyone, but you don't necessarily have to exist like that, in that state of pain. Like there are um, opportunities to heal.
absolutely. Yeah. Um, Tell us how this has sort of played out in your work. So, walk us through maybe the earliest you can remember being interested in sharing your voice and your words, and then how motherhood might have uh, shifted your work for you.
Yeah, so I think that I have been like a radical advocate since for as long as my memory serves me. Like I was that defiant little girl, you couldn't tell anything. And I remember advocating for myself at a very young age. I had a mom who was, while she was a wonderful, loving mother, was super busy as a single mother, trying to work 2 jobs to maintain a household, and didn't necessarily have all of the time, the resources, and the energy to invest. And I remember, in the first grade, seeing kids get to go to like special programs. And I'm like, well, what is that about? And like, I want I think I should be in those programs too, and then advocating for myself to be a part of those programs. So those are like my earliest memories of me like utilizing my voice to make change. And it kind of just continued. I became like a peer mediator in middle school, and becoming a mother, I just naturally moved into that space of advocacy. And I think it was centered around healing, right? I don't think it's specific to any culture, creed, any nation. I think that we as a society universally need healing. Um, and it's like, I care about society and I don't want to be pessimistic or cynical. How can I contribute towards being optimistic while being realistic at the same time? And how do you make healing practical? Very often, healing is a luxury, or healing is shrouded in so much dense knowledge and information, it's hard to apply in the everyday life. It's hard to apply in real time. So my thought process was, how do we make healing practical, right? How can people use everyday tools to be able to do so? And again, I'm going to keep on going back to AmeriCorps. I'm a big, you know, advocate of, like, you know, a big proponent of AmeriCorps, rather, and their programs. It says they have really great programs, and they're programs that are inclusive, that are diverse, that give individuals opportunities who don't necessarily have opportunities to be able to grow, to be able to maximize their potential, to be able to develop personally and professionally, and actually do this kind of work, right? So, like, specifically, I'm in the nonprofit sector, and all of my work is centered around community advocacy and organizing. Um, and I don't think that as a mother, I would not have. Maybe I would have, you know, but I don't know, because I was taking my children out to a community event and they were tabling, and this is how I encountered this. So it's like everything is an opportunity. And again, a desire to create healed children, um, that I know, you know, I gave birth to my third son, and there there was this epiphany that hit me that, you know, one day I'm going to have to relinquish, like, surrender my children to the world. And what that's predicated upon is trusting that I've done a good enough job to prepare them for the world, right? So often we raise our children selfishly because we are so overprotective of them. We don't want them to be hurt. But the reality is, we kind of set them up for failure when we helicopter, or we coddle them, versus, you know, having a healthy relationship and preparing them. So it always challenged me to be better, to do better. And the work-life balance, they feed each other in a way where I want to be the best professional that I can possibly be. And then when we go out into professional spaces, we often put on a persona, right? And not saying that we fake it until we make it or anything like that, but saying, like, we put on our professional selves. And very often we extend courtesies to strangers and other people that we don't with the people who are closest to us, because we're so comfortable with them. We can take all of that off. We can allow ourselves to melt. And sometimes that shows up in projections and passive aggressive violence that we don't intend, you know, to wield with the people that we love. And I told myself, like, right, my children drive me to want to be a better professional, and my professionalism drives me to want to give that experience to my kids and my family. So I think these things kind of just feed each other, being a better mom, being a better professional, and they just, like, teeter back and forth.
And your kids range from, we said 7 to 16.
Yep.
How, I mean, so I've said before on the show, I have a 6-year-old, just one 6-year-old, and it's been really interesting to see how my motherhood has changed as she herself has changed, and her needs have changed, and our relationship has changed. So talk to us a little bit about having kids in sort of different stages of development. So you have a 7-year-old, not too much older than my 6-year-old, all the way up to 16, where, as you said early on, that was the age at which you became a mother.
Yeah.
And yeah, so what is that like to see your children progress as you yourself grow up and then come to motherhood that way?
It's certainly interesting. It is exhausting. And I believe that you can, if you approach it like the whole experience of parenting as a teachable opportunity, that you will fare so much better, right? So I've been able to identify things like my 16-year-old, she went through this phase from 13 to 15. It was awful, right? But it just prepared me for the next one to go through the same phase. And then as an educator, I learned, oh, this is just like we have terrible twos, and, you know, they go through these phases. And if you're keen and you can observe that, oh, like, this is a kid thing. When I talk with moms, they complain about the same things. So I'm saying this is not a your child thing. This is a that age group thing, right? Don't take it personal with your kids. Don't feel like you're a bad mom, right? Because your kid doesn't want to wash up, your boy doesn't want to wash up at the age of 10 when boys start going through that phase where they don't care about being stinky, or your daughter has an attitude because she's moving through puberty. It's like if we can identify that these are phases, we can meet them better,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'll be honest. Me and my daughter talk about it often, right? My youngest son gets the best of me because I'm more developed now than when I was 16 years old, right? It's been a learning curve and a learning process. But I think that a lot of people recognize their faults and then they stop there. It is not enough to recognize them. It's enough to be courageous enough to confront yourself and say, I need to change and grow from this space. And that's what my kids challenge me to do. My youngest son, because he's still in that age range, super affectionate. He like, I mean, he loves on me all the time. He was having an I love you contest the other day. And I was like, it's impossible that you love me more than I love you. And he said, I can do the impossible. Right? So he's like that level of like showing me affection. And then I had this moment and I'm like, oh my God, being a mother when kids are still in that phase is so gratifying. It's almost ego stroking because they need you for everything, right? And they love you no matter what. You can be having a bad day, whatever. It doesn't matter. They're always going to love you. So I told myself, well, how do I continue to appropriate that with my teenagers? Right? Because it's easy. My baby often initiates that with me. I don't have to do the hard work. It's like, how do I do the work of initiating that and appropriating it with my teenagers so that I'm not creating a discord like one that I experienced, which was my mother was an affectionate mom, and I was like, most mothers are naturally affectionate when babies are small, you know? And then they start to get older and kids go through this weird phase where it's like, ew, mom, when you're gross, like, don't kiss me and don't hug me. But we still have to do it anyways. Like. So it's just been very telling. And again, fulfilling for me because I enjoy a challenge. I enjoy like challenging myself to grow. It's probably like similar with a bodybuilder. Like, how far can you push yourself? For me, it's like mentally and like social emotionally. How far can I push myself to continue grow, to be a better person, to be a better mom? And I do want to say, and I don't know if I'm like getting ahead of your questions, but I think it revolves around the way that we pour into ourselves as mothers. Very often we have been taught to sacrifice, to put ourselves on a back burner, to put other people's needs above our own. And that has not served me as a mother. I watched my mom, it did not serve her as a mother. What I saw her was suffer in silence and have these explosions, right, of this built up frustration because she couldn't say, I'm having a bad day, right? I can't do this today, or you guys don't know what my day was like or how much I have to carry, right? Because it's not a child's, problem. And I have a motto that I live by, which is I do not pour into other people. I don't believe into pouring into other people. I believe that if I continuously pour into myself, the people who are in proximity of me will naturally benefit from the overflow. But if I pour out, I empty myself, even a fraction, we're not showing up in our fullness. And it's very difficult when we're splitting ourselves between so many different obligations and we're spreading ourselves thin. You know, we have to figure out how to be an employee, how to be a mother or a business owner, or both at the same time, how to be a good sister, a friend, a daughter, all of these different relationships that we have and we must maintain in aspects of our life. And we can, find ourselves drained and exhausted very quickly. And I focus on how can I replenish myself. Part of that is having healthy communication with my kids. The other day, I was feeling bad for absolutely no reason at all. Just one of those days. And I communicated to my kids. I said, hey, I'm just having one of those days. You know me having those days. and I'm communicating to you that I need to check out today, but I need you guys to tell me what your needs are first so I can set you up safely to be able to exist while I put myself on a timeout. And we have these open communications, open discussions like that support me in being able to replenish myself, right? We often seek reciprocity from the outside world. We want people to replenish us. And it's like, no. Sometimes I just say, I'm going to go to the spa today. I'm going to go take care of myself. Or I'm going to go get a hotel room and do absolutely nothing and just watch TV and lay down.
That is so empowering to hear. And it's something we talk a lot about here about um, making the time for prioritizing yourself as a woman and as a writer and as a monster or whatever. And
Yes.
sometimes, society calls us monstrous if we do things like prioritize our day, making a reservation at a hotel or a spa. Those are necessary things. But how do you, um, how do you what armor do you use, I guess, to protect yourself against feeling mom guilt for making that time for yourself?
Um, so I think that the way that I guard myself against the mom guilt again is not just having the open conversation with my children, but it's giving my children the permission also to experience the entire spectrum of what it is to be a human. Because when I give them permission, I let them know I get to be one too. So we set the example of, yes, I made a decision to have a child and I'm going to be accountable to that and responsible for that. But I'm a human like you too.
Yeah.
you know so that's how I fight the mom guilt. It really doesn't exist. I tell my daughter, and I think again, I had children at such a young age. I was in that weird space of still knowing what it feels like to be a child and becoming a mom. And I tell my daughter all the time, one day you're going to tell your story, right? And you're going to talk about some traumas that you've endured, and I may be a villain in certain parts of your story, and I want you to know that's okay. I am not offended. You get to speak your truth, because over here there is no shame and no blame, right? We do not get the I'm not going to accept any blame for me learning and for me having a human experience, right? And I'm not going to also be so offended that I try to silence you or diminish your truth. It is your truth. You get to own that. So that's what allows me to have those moments. And it's difficult trying to create the balance, but I think if we don't give ourselves excuses, if I can scroll on social media for an hour, then I can carve out time, alone time for myself that is healthy, right? And I can make a balance of what that looks like in my life. I don't want to say that I don't care what society thinks. I think we all care, but I think that I have been empowered in showing up authentically. And I think a part of my grab with the audience that I have is the level of vulnerability and transparency that is there. I think there is strength in talking about the things that we don't talk about because we're so scared to share them. But it's a shared experience. So many of us think about these things by ourselves and we feel like we're alone in those thought processes. And if we just normalize the conversation, right, it will decrease the stigma, the taboo around it, to be able to say, I don't feel like being a mom. When my mom passed away, I did not want to parent. I didn't. And society tells us that we can't say that out loud or we're a bad mom. For the first time in 10 years of being a mother, my kids were away from me for more than 2 nights. My mother and their fathers took them for the whole summer. I didn't miss my kids because I knew they were safe and because I needed time to myself, and it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how do we give ourselves the permission? I think it's a moderation thing. It's about how do we create balance, really, because we can't swing too far where we're overindulging. There becomes a point where self-care becomes overindulgence when you do it too much. So how do we create the balance in our life to say, well, I'm not overdoing it here, but I'm also not overdoing it here? We will experience not just burnout, but compassion fatigue, for the level of emotional labor that goes into being a mom.
Yeah. I think this is a great moment for you to share another piece if you're so willing.
Yes.
Let's do that because we have just a little time left. So this is like the perfect transition.
Okay. So this piece is called Ain't Nobody Got Time for That.
Very
And yeah, so I was inspired to write this piece, and this is going to be like a, trigger warning, a moment of transparency. I had experienced pregnancy loss, and I was so busy being a mother and an employee, I did not have time to grieve. I experienced pregnancy loss on the weekend. On Monday, I had to go back to work. And I also was in a space of not being ready to share with anybody. So I was internalizing all of this. And the moment that I had alone time to myself to cry, my kids started knocking at the door saying, "Mommy," right? And I'm like, oh my God. I started tweaking out because I'm like, I don't have a minute, not even to cry. I can't even, take a minute to grieve for myself. And I thought about that viral clip of that woman who, in the midst of a house fire, said, like, ain't nobody got time to be dying, right? Like, ain't nobody got time for that. And I was like, there was a nuance in that comedic relief of, right, like, that is the reality. Like, I don't even have time to not be present. I have to make sure that I stay alive and I'm functioning, I'm a well-oiled machine so I can do all of the things. Um, so yeah, I'll share this piece.
All right.
Black women ain't got no time to breathe. So we blind black Apple watches. They be like, breathe, black woman, breathe. Black women ain't got no time to grieve. I've miscarried opportunities and I've aborted relationships. I ain't have the time to bereave the murder of my only daughter's father, whose death was as premature as the black babies white medical professionals hesitate to resuscitate. Black women ain't got no time to think. If you wonder why we sometimes act irrational, it's because, hold up, wait a minute, there's something I'm forgetting. Black women ain't got no time to receive because we're too busy giving. Black women are omnipotent. Black women ain't got no time to die. We are too busy living for the sake of our babies. Black women ain't got no time to write. I swear I didn't write this shit. It just poured through my heart like ink-filled teardrops that fall in the dark or in the tub when the house is asleep. Women ain't got no time to shit or shower in peace. Their eyes were watching God. Black women are God. Black women ain't got no time to mourn, so we internalize the pain while the world assumes all Black women have time to do is be scorned. Black women ain't got no time to be torn. We are the horn of Africa, and we broke apart lifetimes ago. And I have been looking for myself ever since. So pardon self if I don't seem like myself. My perceived worth is tied up in unfortunate wealth. I am pillaged black gold. I had to hold and suckle future oppressors, giving birth to successors of food stamps and Section 8. No one is worried about the welfare of Black women or our mental state. Quick fact, white women contract breast cancer at a higher rate, but Black women die from it more often. Death ain't got no date. We look the Grim Reaper in the eye and tell him, you late. Black women are TTG, trained to go. Black women ain't got no time to stop. She's got the whole world in her hands and she can't afford to drop the ball. Black women ain't got no time to cop, please. So we warn white cops, please don't shoot our sons. I am vexed with I for forgetting, for acting like I forgot that I am born of Black matter. I gave birth to life. Black women ain't got no time because Black women are time. Time and space, rhymes and grace under fire, sublime or bold face. The world does not permit Black women to be Black girls. Remember, they are too busy carrying the world on their backs, no longer in their hands. They need those for fighting back, for breaking glass ceilings, generational curses and jaws. Black women ain't got no time to give birth. Their obstetricians have pre-planned vacations. Black women ain't got no time for black babies. We got 6 weeks to get our black asses back to work, so we give them toxic vaccinations, drop them off at random places like white schools and daycares that police skin tone and black hair. A completely different species. My DNA is feared. A black woman's present alone dares. You can never see me turn stone from my stare. I am the original alchemist. You can't walk a mile in my shoes. My feet are bare.
Thank you, Yex. And thank you for joining me today. This has just been incredible. And I feel like the hour has flown by. Thank you
It
so much.
did. It did. Thank you so much for having me. This was an honor. I am always humbled to participate in anybody's own creation, right? Like this is your creation. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us. And hope you'll come back again next season.
Yeah.
And thanks, Yex.
Thank you. I hope you have a great evening.
You too. And thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. It was pretty powerful. And if you did enjoy, please share and go to writermothermonster.com for videos and audio of all of our past episodes. And this one will be up pretty soon. And if you're so inclined, please become a patron or patroness of Writer Mother Monster to help me keep the show going. It's a one-woman band, so all support is most appreciated. Thank you all again. Enjoy your evenings, and I'll see you next week.